Most dog owners look at the small can of wet food in their hand and assume it is simply a richer, tastier, softer version of dry kibble, easier on aging teeth, kinder to a picky appetite, more like a real meal. But research from the last decade now suggests that what is actually happening inside your dog after weeks of daily wet food is closer to a quiet rewiring than a meal. The body changes, the microbes change, the bloodstream changes, and in a way, most owners never see, the relationship between the two of you changes too. Not because you are feeding your dog wrong, not because you do not love them. Most owners reach for that wet food spoon for the kindest reasons in the world. Sad eyes at an empty bowl, sore gums, missing teeth, an old dog who is finally eating again. The unsettling part of the science is not that wet food is bad. It is that wet food changes far more than what is on the menu. It changes their thirst signals, their breath chemistry, their gut microbes, their hormones, and even, in studies that should have made bigger headlines, what is circulating through their blood. Stay for number 6, because that is the one most owners only notice years later, and almost no one ever connects it back to the spoon they used. At dinner time, it is not on any feeding label, but it may be the single most important thing wet food does to your dog. 1. Their thirst signals quietly rewire. You may have noticed that since switching to wet food, your dog drinks less from the water bowl. You shrug it off. Maybe it is the weather. Maybe they are just not as thirsty today. Maybe they will drink later on the next walk. That quiet assumption is exactly where the misread begins. Wet food carries roughly 75 to 85% water by weight, while dry kibble holds only about 6 to 10%. Your dog is not drinking less because they need less. They are getting most of their daily water straight from the bowl in front of them, long before they ever walk to the one in the corner of the kitchen. A 2025 study published in Frontiers in Veterinary Science, examining high-moisture diets in healthy adult dogs, measured this carefully. Dogs eating fresh, high-moisture food consumed roughly 88 grams more total water per day than dogs on standard kibble, even though they drank noticeably less directly from their water bowls. More importantly, higher dietary moisture lowered urine relative supersaturation, which is the precise measurement veterinarians use to predict whether crystals will form inside the bladder. The kidneys, the bladder, and the urethra were doing less concentration work and flushing more often. The same finding has been echoed in earlier work from the Waltham Pet Care Science Institute, which has studied feline and canine hydration for decades. That is not a small effect. Diluted urine is harder to grow stones in. The kidneys spend less of their finite filtering life running on overdrive. Bacteria are flushed before they can settle on the bladder wall, in a body that runs on water the way an engine runs on coolant. Your dog's daily wet bowl is a quiet, ongoing favor to the entire urinary tract. Older dogs, dogs with a stone history, and small breeds with naturally concentrated urine often benefit the most. So do dogs in summer, dogs in dry climates, and dogs who simply do not love drinking from a metal bowl. The reframe is this: your dog is not drinking less because they are lazy or stubborn or losing interest. They are drinking earlier and from somewhere you were not watching. The wet food bowl quietly became their first water bowl. And for many bodies, that single shift is closer to medicine than to mealtime. 2. Their teeth begin a different conversation. The most common warning you will hear about wet food is that it rots teeth. Owners say it. Breeders repeat it, trainers say it, internet comment sections say it the loudest of all. The assumption goes like this: kibble scrapes, wet food sticks, therefore wet food destroys teeth. It feels mechanical, it feels obvious, it feels like common sense passed down from a wiser generation of dog owners. The actual science is more nuanced and more interesting than that. A 2022 study published in the Journal of Animal Science, accessible through PubMed Central, examined 12 adult dogs eating either commercial wet food or commercial dry food for 6 full weeks. Researchers scored plaque buildup, calculus accumulation, gingival inflammation, breath odor, salivary pH, and the entire makeup of the oral microbiome in detail. They sampled the same dogs across the diet switch, so each dog was its own control. Plaque coverage did tend to be slightly higher in dogs eating wet food. Salivary pH leaned more acidic. Breath odor was stronger, but the bigger story was not on the visible enamel, it was inside the microbiome. Bacterial groups strongly associated with periodontal disease, including Porphyromonas gingivalis, Treponema medium, Filofactor and Tannarella forsythia, were more abundant on wet diets, while bacteria associated with healthier gums like Pastorella, Capnosetophaga, and Corynebacterium were more common on dry diets. That does not mean wet food destroys teeth. It means it shifts the microbial weather inside your dog's mouth. The researchers themselves were careful to say that whether these microbiome shifts truly translate into more periodontal disease over years of feeding still requires longer studies. The reframe is this: kibble does not really clean teeth like a toothbrush, despite what bag labels imply. And wet food does not really rot teeth like sugar. Both are quiet bacterial conversations happening on the gum line every day, and your dog cannot tell you who is winning. What tips the balance, in every credible veterinary consensus, is daily brushing and routine professional cleanings. Texture and dental chews help a little. Food matters at the margin, but food never matters more than the brush in your hand. The mouth is one of the few places in your dog's body where you can intervene directly, and most owners never do. 3. Their bloodstream begins carrying something the can never warned you about. This one is harder to say gently, so I will say it plainly. Most canned dog foods come in steel cans with a thin polymer lining painted on the inside. That lining is designed to keep the can from rusting and to keep the food from tasting metallic. The trouble is that the same lining can also leach a chemical called bisphenol A, often shortened to BPA, into the food sitting inside the can. Most owners assume the can is just a container. A 2016 study published in Science of the Total Environment with the DOI 10.016 J Cito 10V DAR 2016 11162 found something that should have changed how every owner thinks about that container. Cheryl Rosenfeld, an associate professor at the University of Missouri College of Veterinary Medicine and an investigator at the Bond Life Sciences Center, ran a controlled study with 14 healthy adult dogs. Each dog was fed daily canned dog food for 2 weeks, including, importantly, one brand that was actively marketed as BPA-free. The owners were instructed to avoid plastic bowls, plastic serving spoons, and plastic stored treats during the study, so the can was the variable being measured. After only 2 weeks, BPA in the dog's blood serum had increased nearly 3-fold. The brand labeled BPA-free showed roughly the same BPA levels in the dogs as the regular brand. Beyond that, the dog's gut microbiomes had shifted in ways that correlated with the increase in BPA. Earlier surveys cited by the Ecology Center found that around 81% of canned dog foods sampled in the United States carried a BPA-based can lining. That does not mean every can of wet food is poison. It means a daily can, opened by a loving hand for a body that may weigh 10 or 20 kilograms, is a daily exposure most owners never knowingly agreed to. BPA is classified as an endocrine disruptor. It can mimic hormones in the body, which is precisely why pediatricians and regulators moved to remove it from baby bottles, sippy cups, and many food cans for humans years ago. Your dog's hormone system is, gram for gram, far smaller than yours. The reframe is this: your love is not the problem. The lining is. Look for cans that are independently tested as non-BPA. Move to wet food in pouches and trays with safer linings, or simply rotate wet meals into the week rather than relying on a daily can. Your dog will not notice the change. Their bloodstream will. 4. Their gut microbes start speaking a new language. Inside your dog's intestine lives an entire city of bacteria. Trillions of them, quietly running digestion, producing vitamins, calming inflammation, training the immune system, and even sending chemical messages that travel up to the brain. Most owners imagine food as fuel. Microbiologists see it as a daily message to that city. Wet food carries a profoundly different message than kibble. The high moisture, the soft texture, the higher meat and broth content, the lower starch, the different fiber profile, every one of these shifts which microbes thrive and which fade. Researchers at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, including Kelly Swanson, the Kraft Heinz Endowed Professor in Human Nutrition in the Department of Animal Sciences, have shown across multiple peer-reviewed studies that fresh and human-grade wet diets are extremely digestible, over 85% for most indispensable amino acids, and dogs eating them produce smaller, firmer, less smelly stools, and require fewer total calories per day. That is the gentle side of the story. The less gentle side comes from the same Rosenfeld canned food study and from a separate body of work on diet softening. 2 weeks of daily canned food not only raised BPA but also reshaped the gut microbiome of those 14 dogs, and the shifts were correlated with the BPA rise. A separate 2022 study published in Frontiers in Microbiology, examining beagles fed dry food softened with water, found that simply adding water to kibble produced softer stools, a higher diarrhea ratio, and an increase in some pathogenic bacterial groups. That does not mean wet food poisons the gut. It means the gut is not a passive bag waiting for nutrition. It is a living, learning ecosystem that responds to every spoonful, every day, and quietly learns to expect the next one. Switch a dog from wet to dry suddenly, and you are not just changing their meal. You are evicting half a city of microbes that built their economy around what was in yesterday's bowl. The reframe is this: your dog's belly is not asking for fuel, it is asking for consistency. The slower you transition between formats, the kinder you are to a city you cannot see. And if any of this is starting to change how you see your dog right now, go ahead and subscribe. Every video on this channel is built around what the science actually says about your dog, not what we have always assumed. The next number gets even closer to the bone. 5. Their hunger system rewrites itself. Wet food is heavier in the bowl, softer on the tongue, and carries up to 10 times more water than kibble by weight. That is exactly why the hunger system inside your dog responds to it differently from the very first meal. A widely cited Tufts University analysis of pet foods conducted by the Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine and reported through Tufts Now found enormous variation in calorie content. Even among foods marketed as low-calorie or for weight management, wet diets ranged from roughly 189 to 398 kilocalories per can. That variation matters more than most owners realize because the calorie load per gram of wet food is far lower than kibble. A dog that fills up on a high moisture meal feels physically full faster, often on a meaningfully smaller calorie total. On its own, that sounds like a weight loss dream, and in many overweight dogs, it is. But the body learns. Over weeks of daily wet feeding, your dog's stretch receptors in the stomach recalibrate to expect that volume. Their satiety hormones, leptin, cholecystokinin, peptide YY, the chemical messengers that tell the brain, we are full, start firing reliably at the wet meal's particular weight and texture. Switch back to kibble after months on wet, and many dogs eat the same calories but feel less full. Try to free-feed dry food after a long wet food season, and a real number of dogs overeat and gain weight. That is the rewrite. Wet food does not make a dog fat by itself. Some studies even suggest it can be a useful weight loss tool because of the fullness factor. But it can quietly teach a body to associate fullness with weight and moisture rather than with calories, which is a profoundly different language than the one kibble teaches. And once a body has learned that language, going back is not a switch. It is a slow retranslation. The reframe is this: your dog is not lying when their face says, "I am full," but the face is reading a meter you yourself helped install. 6. And this is the one most owners only see years in. Their dog stops being neutral about mealtime and starts being emotionally changed by it. Wet food has dramatically more aroma than dry food. The volatile fat molecules released from a freshly opened can are estimated to be 20 to 100 times stronger to a dog's nose than the dust drifting off kibble, and your dog's olfactory bulb, which is roughly 40 times larger by relative size than yours, does not just smell food. It tags an emotional bookmark on it. Every meal is also a memory. Every memory is also an attachment. Researchers studying canine palatability and feeding behavior, including teams publishing in the Journal of Animal Science and reviewed in PubMed Central literature on companion animal nutrition, have found that dogs fed high aroma, high moisture diets show stronger anticipatory behaviors before meals. Pacing, vocalizing, more focused gaze on the owner, and a more pronounced stress response when feeding is delayed or skipped. Their cortisol patterns around mealtime become tighter and more predictable. The ritual becomes the relationship. That is the unsettling part. A wet food bowl, opened daily by your hand, is no longer just food. It is a moment your dog is learning to expect, to anticipate, to need, and to bond with. Over months and years, your dog is not only being nourished by you, they are being emotionally calibrated to you. That is why so many owners report that their dog goes quiet when wet food stops, or acts betrayed when the bowl is plain dry kibble for a day. The quietness is not manipulation, it is the loss of a daily, emotional appointment they did not know they were keeping. The reframe and the reveal is this: the cost of a daily wet meal is not only on the gum line, the kidneys, the gut, or the can lining. It is also on the tender, fragile, beautiful machinery of bonding itself. Done with care, that machinery is one of the most healing relationships your dog will ever have. Done carelessly, it is one of the easiest to break. If this gave you something to sit with, leave a comment with one observation you have made about your own dog's behavior around wet food you're noticing is exactly how we learn together. Hit like so the science reaches more dog owners who think they are simply opening a can. And if you are new here, subscribe. Every video on this channel begins the same way, with a question most dog owners have never stopped to ask. And then we go looking for the real answer. Not the simplified version, not the comfortable assumption, the actual science. Because your dog is not just fed by you, they are slowly, quietly, irreversibly shaped by you.